Hey everyone, it's Debbie Potts, the host of the Low Carb Athlete podcast, and I'm here doing a new podcast episode by myself to continue talking about research and data information I've collected and put together in slides so I can remember what to tell you, but also so you can watch it on YouTube. So, my Low Carb Athlete YouTube channel is a great way to listen to all the podcasts, but also watch the ones I have with slides. So I've done two recent ones on matching the female hormone cycle with your exercise and nutrition and biometrics. And then this is part of the seminar I gave at KetoCon this year, talking about training and fueling tips for the low carb athlete. So ideally, you can watch the slides if you are driving your car. Great to listen to the audio version. So give you both options. So here we go. Matching training and fueling for the endurance athlete to improve fat loss, health, and performance. As I would say, I'm training myself, and hopefully you are, for events and races this year, just to be fit and strong. I want to be lean and healthy from the inside out. But also I'm concerned about how am I going to be moving, thriving, and operating my day-to-day activities when I'm 80 years old, especially as my dad just passed away at 80 years old. And a lot of the conditions that he had were choices that they made because they didn't move, walk, and get their mobility, get their strength training, and get foods that were not processed. So it's hard to get real food for some people. And, a lot of the choices we make start to show up when we're older. So I'm on a mission to help you learn how to be fit and healthy from the inside out with what I call, that you should know by now, the holistic method. So let's continue on for the athlete. So let me get to the slides and find the right button to click as I have this on full screen. All right. So fueling experiment. You've probably heard of Professor Noakes in South Africa. The Noakes study, when they added carbs 60 grams before high intensity interval training, improved performance in a 4-minute workout interval, but not in 30 seconds. So Dr. Dan Plews talks about this in his Endure IQ program. You can do his courses for a great price, but different courses for different horses. I like that saying, but it's N equals 1. All of this kind of matching your fueling when you're exercising before, during, and after. And when you're racing, it depends on you, the individual, and it depends on the type of exercise you're doing. What heart rate are you working out at? What intensity? So there's research when carbs do improve performance. Now, I've talked about a lot of this on recent podcasts that, yes, I can go a long time and not eat, but is that good for me? If I'm going for a long bike ride or run, I want to, of course, burn fat from a main fuel source, but I want to go fast. I want to be strong. I want to have great times. And if I'm struggling on my bike, should I just have something to eat? And knowing how to time carbs, I'm very carb intolerant. So I'm careful, and I'm very sensitive to a lot of sugars and sweeteners. So I'm a high maintenance person that has problems with everything. So it is N equals 1. And we have to look at each workout and match that intensity of your exercise with what you should eat or not eat. And if it's more of a fat and protein, or just fat, or when should you time in those carbs. So anyways, anything about anaerobic threshold is a point where you add in extra carbs before exercise can impact that power. So sometimes what I was just saying, if you want to increase your power output, you might need to add a little extra carbohydrates. Now, I just said this in a recent podcast. I need to clarify this. Having extra carbohydrates doesn't mean processed foods. So think in the terms of nature's foods, carbs, or even, I'm always trying to find a bar that's clean. And actually, a side note, the fasting bar that says it doesn't break a fast, which is kind of seems odd, but because it's food. But the fast bar has actually the cleanest ingredients of all bars that I've seen. So HIIT training and VO2 max in studies, they found extra carbs pre-training to that workout, 20 grams to 60 grams is what you want to test to see if that improves your power. So if you're using heart rate monitor power, that might be something you can look at testing. So if you're doing a longer endurance training and doing more lower intensity, that's where you can just do fat for fuel. If you're doing strength training, you might be good having a low carb breakfast or nut butter, or, I just do key on aminos, essential aminos. If anything, in some LMNT and some water and some adrenal cocktail that's vitamin C in it. So it depends on the time of day you're doing your workout and what you ate the night before and how long that fast was. So really dial it in for each client. But let's go on the next part is if you're doing an Ironman or 70.3 training, that fueling for that workout depends on the duration. So if you're going a lower heart rate, that you're burning higher percentage of fat, you may be okay just having salted water. But if you're going longer, you may need some fuel. So it depends. Again, so here's what I go through with clients that is from EndureIQ. So go to EndureIQ and sign up for their program. It's 90 minutes, hour 30, 2 hours, 2 hours 30, 3 hours, 3:30, 4 hours, 4.5 hours or longer. This is what we kind of use to figure out endurance strength, Ironman specific, 70.3 specific, or a VO2 max HIIT training session. What should you eat before or after? And this depends. I think, using like I just interviewed Biosense, figure out, how much fat you're burning. If you add too much fuel, too much carbs for your body, if what you ate the night before, and really looking at the whole picture. Again, stress and sleep impact everything. And if you're a female athlete, this might be different based on your cycle during ovulation and during luteal phase, that you need a little bit more carbohydrate, real food sources. So training duration during workout, what you can do, when you should add food. Maybe it's after a 2.5 hour period of time where you add in low carb fuel, or when do you add in whole food carbohydrates? So we want to remember nature's food for your carbohydrates. And I'm, again, carb tolerant, so intolerant. So having a banana for me gives me a headache. It's too much. And so I might be different, but having a bar, a quarter of a bar, if I'm going longer, helps me. I can't eat a whole bar at once. I break it up into pieces. So there's some ideas for you. And, a lot of times I just do electrolytes as LMNT packets and sweeten because I can't do stevia. Again, I'm a high maintenance. So strategic carb timing. When do you add in carbs for your rocket fuel, that backup fuel tank? We know we burn carbohydrates as a backup tank, and fat should be our main fuel tank. Once you're a fat adapted athlete, we're burning primarily fat, but when we're doing higher heart rates. So I like to think of it as intuitive fueling and N=1 experiment. So Dan Plews talks about figuring out, when should you add those carbs? We've talked to Peter Defty about that. And Ben Greenfield, I've read a lot of his articles and podcasts I've listened to on fasted exercise. But think about these questions. Do you feel best with less frequent fasts or shorter duration fasts? Do you feel best when you're eating your largest meal after you work out, or do you need to wait? Do you sleep and perform your best in workouts with more carbs in the evening? So I said that wrong. Does your sleep and do you perform your best and sleep your best when you have carbs in the morning? So is your sleep better if you have some carbs in the evening, is what I should have wrote there. Do you feel best when you match your energy intake with exercise intensity? So if you're doing higher heart rate, you might feel your performance and you nail those splits if you have, say, something with 20 grams of carbohydrates, or, maybe a quarter of a bar to get those 20 grams and see how that feels. Or I've been trying to do, liquid calories as in my coffee with some layered superfood unsweetened creamer with some collagen, and maybe that's enough. But you got to add in some carbs. If you're doing a higher intensity, you might feel better. But I know a lot of us can do it without carbs. So when should you add carb fuels, and is it necessary? So a lot of people say, I can do this workout without carbs. Yes. But if you're trying to do a sprint section, you might be impacting your performance. Your performance may suffer because we're not eating enough. So here's a research study, a 7-week N=1 investigation, a 4-week low carb, high fat diet phase, which this person drank only water during training and performance trials, and then a 3-week habitual diet plus carb ingested phase. So LCHF is low carb, high fat plus carbohydrates, CHO, during which he followed this usual low carb diet, but ingested 60 grams of carbohydrates during 8 high intensity interval training sessions and performance trials. After each phase, the rates of fat oxidation, which you'll hear about the most because that's what people look at, that rate of fat oxidation, 30-second sprint, and then they looked at a 4-minute sprint, a 20K time trial, and then a 100K time trial performance. They're measured after each phase. Now, when compared to just low carb, high fat, the 20K time trial improved by 2.8% after they had a low carb, high fat intake with carbohydrates. So when to add in carbohydrates depends on that intensity and duration of that workout. There was no change, as I said earlier slide, in a 30-second sprint power. There's a small improvement in the 4-minute sprint power, 1.6%. And then there's a small reduction in the 100K time trial, 1.1%. So the authors concluded in this study that ingesting carbohydrates during exercise was likely beneficial for the fat-adapted athlete. So remember, this is on a fat-adapted athlete during high-intensity endurance type exercise by 30 minutes, right? But likely did not benefit from the short sprint or prolonged endurance. So is that just the right amount where probably a little more glycogen depleting metabolism? So the time trial. So interesting. You have to look at matching that nutrition you're feeling with that exercise intensity and duration. So a 20K time trial, it improved having some carbs, but a 100K time trial didn't do that much more. So you'll hear different things of when to add in those carbs. So nightly or weekly. So Ben Greenfield has lots of blogs and podcasts he's done in the past on where to have your carbohydrates, real food sources. Again, we're not talking about refined flours and vegetable oils and all the packaged processed foods and the sugars. So for active people where you actually get carbohydrates at Libitum, you only have specific portions during the week or eat at specific stages during the week. So you add those carbs in the evening or maybe like on a Sunday. So if you are a normal non-athletic sane life, you might just need a weekly refeed. So say Monday through Saturday, you stay more ketotic, nutritional ketosis, and then Sunday you would add in higher grams, say like 150 grams of carbohydrates versus 50 grams. Now, bodybuilders or pro athletes who often do more workouts during the day may benefit from a nightly refeed of carbohydrates with even 100 to 200 grams of carbohydrates in that evening meal. Now, you follow this with an intermittent overnight fast of 12 to 15 hours, and you work out the next day, you stay low on carbs all day, and then repeat again at night. And that's what Ben Greenfield suggests, and that's what he does for his exercise. And he does something easy in the morning, does his harder workout about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, a few hours after lunch, a couple hours before dinner. In that dinner, you earn those carbs because he did a more glycogen depleting workout in his late afternoon session. So it depends, right? So again, fasting and carb timing, when to add carbs in to your breakfast when you're breaking your fast. So if you are a pro athlete or an athlete doing a 2-a-day workout session, you do want to add in some carbohydrates if you're going to exercise again within the next 8 hours. So say, for example, I did a speed workout at 6 a.m. running, and then I'm going to do master swim workout at noon, when I tend to break my fast when I start to feel hungry around 9 or 10 a.m. And I have to time this because I can't eat before swimming, and I don't want to not eat until 2 o'clock in the afternoon because that's too long of a fast. That impacts my health. That I would be able to, if I feel like it, adding a little more carbohydrates, like a couple potatoes, or I know I had some fermented, locally made sourdough bread with avocado and chicken and goat cheese and olive oil and sea salt the other day, and that was amazing. So strategic carb timing, most people can wait all the way until the end of the day to eat any carbohydrates, because the end of the day, the carb refeed will restore those glycogen levels, restore the carbohydrate levels, so you can get up the next day and do a workout fine, fasted, without eating carbohydrates after your breakfast. So that's Ben Greenfield's saying, or philosophy. So you can get away with the morning workout without eating beforehand. You could take some ketones as HVMN. You could take some aminos, the tablets, capsules, and take those beforehand. So Rob Wolf, on the other hand, has people do a great test. I like clients to try this out with their CGM or use Keto Mojo type of blood testing of your glucose. So you can do a 7-day carb tolerance test that's listed in his book, Rob Wolf's book, Wired to Eat. So he has a list on his website. I think he has this as well, but find 50 grams of effective carbs. First thing in the morning, eat your test carb that you chose. You'll eat no other food at this time. Allow beverages that have black coffee and water, okay. If you do have a beverage, make sure that it's the same beverage each morning so you're consistent the way you're testing. Write down which carbohydrate you're testing and the time you ate it, and then set a timer for 2 hours. In 2 hours after you ate that carb, test your blood glucose and record the reading. You want to see how much your glucose went up. So you can read more about Rob Wolf's 7-day carb tolerance test in his book, or find it on his website. Notice his picture of sushi and rice. And a lot of times, I know when CGM company said that rice was the biggest spike in people's glucose when they had sushi with rice. So think about it. Again, note, not all carbs are all evil. Not all carbs are not all evil. I really need to do spell check when I do these slides. Strategic carb timing is important for the metabolically flexible athlete. So once you are fat adapted and have gone into that kind of cold keto fat adapted process, and you know you're reliant on fat for your main fuel tank, then we can start playing with adding in carbohydrates. Now, Peter Defty's talked a lot about this, and Dan Plews talks about this, but it's your backup fuel source. You want to be metabolically flexible. You don't want to be so strict in keto that you're not able to shift back to carbs. So I'm finding a lot of athletes are so strict in keto that they're not given a little wiggle room to have that get up and go pickup speed that you might want when you're doing a running race, a 10K race or half marathon or bike race. You need to be able to have good fat metabolism, oxidize that fat well at a high level, so you can work out at a higher heart rate and burn more fat. But then we also need to be able to shift to that carb metabolism when we're going all out. So we can have that get up and go, back up, fight or flight tank fuel. So strategic carbs give your body the ability to push harder when the difficulty of the workload pushes against you. So you have to work harder. Now, the hormesis, you hear that a lot. Is it a stress that should be acute stress that we respond and we adapt and get stronger from it? So from that stress causes our cells to be more robust. And we're talking with exercise at a mitochondrial level. So during the recovery phase where carbs are low and nutritional delivery is high, your cells build more mitochondria via mitochondrial biogenesis. This means that your cells have more mitochondria and each of your mitochondria become more robust. So important part. Now here we go. Next part, the increase in mitochondria potential increases your fat oxidation oxidation in two ways: the rate of fat you can burn, the ability to metabolize fat at higher intensity levels with exercise. Then insulin, which is an anabolic hormone, when used sparingly, is an insulin sensitive environment. In this anabolic state, insulin helps build your muscles and your cells. So, an occasional hit of carbs helps drive the anabolic effect of insulin, results in improved performance without affecting fat metabolism. So we want to look at strategically adding in those carbs and help improve our insulin sensitivity, working out and getting that adaptation process. So it's not all or nothing. We still have fat burning. We switch back to burning fat, but we need to have carb metabolism and fat metabolism. So what are those carbs? What are carbohydrates? So take away all the junk food. Think about what real food is. Safe starches, for example, taro root, plantain, potatoes, cooked and cooled, rice, cooked and cooled, sweet potato, tapioca, yuca, and yam. So think the underground vegetables. So all plants contain protection mechanism known as anti-nutrients that discourage their consumption by mammals, which is what a lot of people are against, having plant-based diet or adding plants. But there are safe starches that contain minimal to no anti-nutrients, especially compared to other varieties of plants such as grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, and nightshades. Now, I'll add to this, Ben Greenfield just did a great little video the other day saying you should still have these things sometimes, grain, nuts, seeds, legumes, nightshades, if your gut is healthy, because again, it's that hormetic stress. It is a plant giving, say, poison, and you're having that once in a while, if it's once a week or once a month, not more than once a week, I think 4-day rotation diet, that your body can respond to that, react, and defend itself. Now, safe starches don't have as much or at all anti-nutrients, those underground vegetables. So safe starches include white rice, which is always, I've added this in, white rice versus brown rice. Did you know? I used to always think brown rice was healthier for you because white just is like usually bad. But brown rice contains the bran, the hull, and the husk where the anti-nutrients are. So white rice is because they take off the outside layer of the rice and ends up being white rice. So it's actually the better part than brown rice. So who knew? I was growing up, I thought brown rice was healthier. So I thought bananas and having a bagel and orange juice for breakfast was healthy too, right? So what we thought was healthy is so not always right. So other things you can do: sweet potatoes and yams, taro root, cassava, plantains, the green bananas. But potatoes are a nightshade. And I've noticed this was myself lately when Neil makes these little red potatoes and bacon fat, I'll get a headache. I'm very sensitive to a lot of foods, but the benefit of that, I know within seconds if it's going to bother me. So some advantage I have of being overly sensitive because my body will tell me it. And lately it's having just one little potato, even though it's with fat and protein, I can taste it on my, but take a bite without other stuff with it, and it irritates me. So that might be the nightshade is an issue for me. Next, S Fuels has some great ideas on their program. We did a great podcast with Leighton Phillips, the founder of S Fuels. But think of also as good carbs as strawberries, blueberries, raspberries. So berries are good, ideally organic. Dark chocolate, onions, asparagus, avocado is in there, broccoli. And I like having broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. Sometimes they make me burp, but Brussels sprouts and bacon, yummy. And broccoli cooked. I don't do them raw. Broccoli, cauliflower, get cooked. Great again in bacon fat. Cook the bacon, then cook your vegetables. So good under broil. And then there's lots of good options, but you want to match those with your workouts. And females can tolerate a little more of those carbs during their late luteal phase. Strategic carb timing. So Peter Defty, that has optimal fat metabolism, and Vespa has a quote here. Once you are fat adapted, you're in a metabolic state that your aerobic capacity is to its full potential, that you are burning fat at higher heart rate, and you can go longer, you can go higher heart rate and still burn a higher percentage of fat. You can tolerate some concentrated carbohydrates in both your diet and when you're fueling in your workout. So you can get the performance punch carbs as you can get with Vespa. And Vespa is just a little bee propolis. So you can get a little bit of carbohydrates from that honey, and there's a little orange juice in there and the amino oils. And it's a good little kick, and it's not going to throw you out of fat metabolism. It just gives you extra energy for a workout. So we have to remember, this doesn't mean you're doing a high carb processed food diet and we're not eating high carbs all the time. They're strategically placed. So the amount and timing of carbohydrates varies and is highly individualized for the athlete and sport. As I said, my genetics, I'm very carb intolerant and I'm very sensitive to a lot of foods. So my food plan is going to look different than yours. And you're going to need to look at your workouts. If you're training 80% of the time, hopefully low intensity, and then 20% of the time you're doing high intensity and going hard enough so you can earn those carbohydrates. So here's Peter. We did a podcast recently on a study with Vespa, doing a fasted treadmill workout and then doing fasted with Vespa. And you could see the runners here. This one could go longer. If you're looking at the video, you'll see the slides of the metabolic crossover point. The orangey yellow color is carbohydrates, fat is a blue line, and where the metabolic crossover point is the orange, the carbs come above the fat. So you can see the difference when they added in Vespa. They could extend their time of burning fat before the carb intake was higher than carb fuel was more than the fat fuel. And then there's a female that actually tested. The left chart on the left is Vespa, fasted and Vespa, and then when she was fasted. So the fat versus carbohydrates. And then the orange line, she was crossed over longer. That's interesting, right? So everyone's different. So the fat adaptation in the program with Dan Plews that you can do goes through their phase to be fat adapted. So you want to look at phase 1. If you are coming from a higher carb background, you want to focus on just the baseline. Let's work on what you're eating. So when I start with clients, just, don't do anything different. Just write down what you're using. I use Chronometer and Practice Better so that it goes together. I can look at what they're eating, get an idea, get them NutriSense, a CGM, have them test their HRV with Oura Ring or Whoop, or Hanu Health has a new HRV strap I'm going to test, and collecting data. So phase 1, just getting baseline. Once we finish that, we move into phase 2. Let's start eating whole foods. Let's get nutrient dense foods and swap out the processed foods for real foods. Not even working on keto or anything. I want you to eat real foods. So it's one baby steps. We're moving slowly. And then we get to phase 3 that Dan Plews calls us cold keto. Now this phase lasts 3 weeks for men. Women, we're going to split it up differently if you're still cycling premenopausal. We're going to drop the carbs down to 50 grams of carbohydrates, eat good quality animal protein, healthy fats, nuts and seeds, non-starchy vegetables. So up to 70% fat. Females, we break this into 2 phases, working on your menstrual cycle days 7 to 14. And we divide it 2 weeks, 2-week block. Now, so what do we do with their exercise during this time? When your baseline, you're eating just normally. We're just going to observe, right? So we're maintaining a normal training program. Phase 2, we go towards eating whole foods. So get rid of the processed foods, get rid of the vegetable oils, the white flours, refined sugars, start eating real food. So you're going to exercise during this time is going to be the same, but you're going to reduce the volume around 10%. And then we get to phase 3 where we're doing cold keto. We're going high fat, low carb, 50 grams of carbs, reduce your training load. You got to take it easy during this time. So you can do 25% less of your training volume, but you're going to maintain 2 HIIT training sessions when you go really hard. And most people don't go hard enough to make it a HIIT training and then go easy. So you're going to do those intervals to help empty out those glycogen stores and help you get through this. So phase 4 is kind of maintenance. It's that sweet spot where we stay and course correct, adjust. You're gradually increasing your training over 2 to 3 weeks, returning to your normal training structure. So this is where we're going to fine tune, adjust, and course correct as we go and look at your training. So it's kind of fun. So you can learn more on my podcast, as I've been reaching other experts in this area and talking a lot about this all year long, and my blog and resources on debbiepotts.net. So if you want more information, head there, and I will go into more I do and your IQ phase 1 baseline and looking at what that looks like in phase 3 cold keto and what that's going to look like. A day example for Dr. Dan Plews. And then we look at cold keto phase and then finding that sweet spot. So that's what I do with clients. And I'm doing that with my VIP clients, where we're doing their nutrition, their exercise, their sleep, their stress, tracking everything, as well as doing functional lab tests and working on cycling keto in and out and figuring out that carb timing that works best for them as an individual. And say you're doing 5 to 6 days lower carb, and then you add in a little more carbs. And then I'm really mapping out for the female athlete where we can really adjust their nutrition and their exercise type of workouts with their hormone cycle. So the training types, we want to look at how we're training, what races you're training for, and when to add in HIIT training, high and low glycogen state post-workout, which gives you higher expressions of adaptation in low glycogen state athletes versus fully fed athletes. And then low glycogen increases fat metabolism and superior adaptation to that training. So you learn this with Dan Plews in the Endure IQ program that you can take. But when to add HIIT training, talk to the prof, Paul Larson, about HIIT science on his website. But high and low heart rate, only 20% of the time. A lot of people do it too much. And then there's people that don't do HIIT training right. They don't work hard enough. So I'm going to end there, but hopefully that gives you some information on where to get started in your fat adaptation process and how to match your training and fueling together. So if you have questions, reach out for a consultation with me at debbiepotts.net. I'd be happy to chat with you and look at what your goals are and what your areas of opportunity are, as well as what's coming up this year for you. And a lot of people are trying to do all the right things, but still struggling, as I was, and trying to figure out what works best for you as an individual is going to vary, because we're all unique and have different hidden internal stressors that impact. Hidden stands for hormones, immune function, digestion, detoxification, energy systems, and your nervous system. So we want to look at testing and not guessing and finding out what's going on with your body, but it's those external stressors that really impact our health. So you might be doing all the right things. You're fasting 12 to 15 hours. You're doing your workouts in the morning, low heart rate. You're doing the HIIT training, but you still feel like crap. So it could be other things going on. A lot of people give me their blood chemistry and they're showing a lot of digestion issues, poor digestive breakdown, absorption, a lot of signs of parasites, pathogens, dysbiosis, candida, yeast overgrowth, and hormone imbalances. So looking at the Dutch complete test, looking at the GI map, looking at your just food journal. How do you feel? Looking at metabolic typing, look at your genetics, your ancestry background. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle I collect with my clients to figure out what works best for you and really investigate the whole you to figure out your optimal, ideal training schedule, and your lifestyle habits are the other half of it. It's just training is one part. We've also got our sleep routine and how we wake up and start the day, how we end the day, making sure we're doing some yoga, mobility training, and we're doing some gratitude time, some journaling, meditation, breathing exercises, hot, cold showers. There's all that we work on. So make sure if you are trying to figure out your nutrition or your exercise plan or training for a race or a big event this year, that you're working on your stressors. Identify those external stressors. And sometimes you need to invest in your health and identify those hidden internal stressors with functional lab testing. Sadly, our doctors don't test any of the markers that we need to look at. And sadly, insurance doesn't cover any of these functional labs. So it does cost money. And sometimes we just have to budget and maybe do them slowly, but we want to do them all at once, ideally, to see the whole picture, because everything gives clues to something else. So I just want to share the information with you of the slides I'm working on, and they'll all be in an ebook on my website. So head to debbiepotts.net and get some of those free ebooks on there. And hopefully someone edited them for me, because there's some, as I read them out loud, some of them need some fixing. So I apologize about that, but that's me. And I will be off. I need to go walk. I can't sit this long, and I'm going to go do some mobility training and walk around and watch the sunset and do some yin yoga and write my gratitude journal, have a shower that's cool because it's so hot here today, and cool down before I get to bed. So make sure you have your sleep hygiene routine, prioritizing your sleep, because if your sleep is crappy, your next day isn't going to be great. You're grumpy, so you're not as happy, and your workouts are going to suffer, and you're probably not eating the best. So really work on that sleep, and sleep and stress go hand in hand, as well as all the other elements of the holistic method. So I thank you for listening and watching the show, and hopefully you can reach out with your questions. So chat soon. Thank you.